Call me Donald Trump. I just spout off. Give me a topic. I just come up with it.
The next Donald Trump over here.
Half things are incorrect.
Yeah, that's still better than the current president.
Welcome to Unqualified Opinion, the podcast equivalent of a 2-7 offsuit hand in poker. How's it going, Scott?
It's going well. See, I don't even know what that means, so I can't comment on it.
So 2-7 hand is the worst hand in poker, but if you don't understand poker and you're still playing, you're going to stay in instead of automatically folding because you're kind of a noob. So the translation here is that we are the 2-7 offsuit, which means we're the worst option for you to be picking is someone who's a podcast listener. But if you don't know any better, you'll keep listening.
That is deep. We are going on a backpacking trip next weekend. One of the things you can do, I think you are the one bringing the cards based on that list. You can teach me poker. And that will have been maybe the 50th time someone has taught me poker, where I promptly forget as soon as the deck is back in its little house.
You can't really play two-person poker. It just doesn't work.
I know that much, I think.
But, given that we are going to have this backpacking trip coming up, we should do some exploration into what are some good two-person card games, because all the card games I know require at least 3 people.
I'm going to write that down as a thing to do on one of my many pieces of scrap paper where I write down all of my work notes and then promptly lose all of them.
And if this was a legitimate podcast, this is where we would ask the viewers for suggestions and to write comments about potential games we could play. We also don't have a place for them to write those comments. So
find two-person card games. I'm also making a backgammon set, if you remember.
Oh my god, yes. Yes. So something that our viewers don't know is that whenever we meet up, we get really high and we play backgammon. And we play it for a minimum of 3.5 hours at a time. And so,
it's so ridiculous.
Needless to say, we are solidly slightly below mediocre when it comes to backgammon at this point. And
in there.
It's
a game that reveals itself slowly over time, the different complexies.
And over increasing quantities of weed as well.
Oh yes, it becomes really complicated and deep when you're stoned out of your mind.
When you're not sure if you rolled 2 6s or if there's a snake dragon revealing itself from the surface about to eat you. It's really sometimes hard to distinguish.
It becomes a multi-dimensional adventure game. Anyway, well, I was telling Steve earlier. Today I went shopping. My shopping trips now consist of buying caulk. That's CAULK, not CO.
Yeah, don't worry, folks. Scott doesn't have to pay for the other one.
No, I don't. And birdseed, and that's my life. So I've enjoyed watching the birds, and I've been very bored about my birds recently. The birds in my yard, and they've just been all brown and boring. And then I'll get a cardinal or two, which are annoying. If you've never heard a cardinal speak, it makes this really annoying noise. Finally, today I got some chickadees, and I got this bird that I hadn't seen before. It was like sort of red and brown, and it just made my day. And I think that premium bird seed I bought really did it for this bird. So
I gotta say, this sounds like the most Minnesota story I've ever heard. You're a Midwestern bird watcher now.
I am. I even have a little book identifying them.
What is exciting about this?
Nothing.
What? Why are you so into it then?
It's like collecting Pokemon, but they're birds.
But they're real.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't enslave them and force them to fight for their lives.
Exactly. And it's harder. It's trickier because you can't tell sometimes what types of birds are what. And you have to look them up. They don't have their name emblazoned across them. So it's...
honestly, have you tried to catch Entei or Suicune, like that in like version gold and silver, that's fucking hard. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
that is
know.
really hard. I guess this is the 2020 version of 1999, Scott.
How's the house?
It's a relative. The house is good. Refinancing.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Refinancing to a 15-year, 2.25%. My payments go up $50 a month, and I shave 4 years off of my mortgage, which is nice.
What's the net savings on that you're getting?
Not a significant amount, because to refinance you have to pay fees to the lender. So you can only really refinance if the savings over time, including factoring in interest rate, the interest rate or inflation exceeds the fees, and in this case it does. So I don't know, 15,000. It's not a lot, 50, 1 5,
That sounds significant.
but it's more about paying it off. Like I would then have 4 additional years of having, if I'm still living here, or even if I'm not, if I'm renting it, of having zero, excuse me, other than tax and maintenance, zero cost for the house.
Yeah, which is huge.
Which is really nice.
And also, 2.5% is what you said?
2.25.
2.25%. That sounds absurdly low. I don't know anything about mortgage rates, but I thought they were upwards of 4%.
2.25%, and I bought it the day after it was the lowest ever. So I bought it 0.1 percentage point higher, or actually half of a percentage point higher, so 0.05% higher. They have never been that low. I went back and looked at a table of interest rates over the past 30 years. Never has it been that low.
Wow. Congratulations. That's awesome.
I got it
Good for
at
you.
rock bottom price. So that, and then now I'm of course finagling for every last dollar with my mortgage company, showing them counter offers. I want to get them down on principle as low as possible, because I do not want them making money off of me.
Dude, take the win. You've already won.
Oh no. I have $500 more to go.
Oh my god.
And I am going to get them to the mat.
Folks, this is what happens when COVID strikes. Scott goes crazy and he becomes a weird penny pincher around his mortgage refinancing strategies.
No. There is actually a reason. So if I don't get them down another $500, I will be net on closing. So when I close, I don't get any money back, because they estimate the amount you need for the loan. They set that. The mortgage company sets that, and then over time, as between when you get the loan approved and when you actually close on the mortgage, stuff changes. Like your taxes will go up or down, your insurance will go up or down, fees and fines go up and down, whatever. And so it may end up where you actually need to pay more, maybe 1,000, 2,000 more, or if like fees and taxes and whatever went down, you can actually end up getting money back from your refinance, because there's money left over from the loan, the new loan. So I want to have money left over because I want to buy a couch for the back room, and I want it to have feel like it's a free couch.
Is there space in the back room for a couch?
There is a little day bed that actually folds out into a bed.
In addition to the full bed that you have.
No, the bed's going out. It'll be a little love seat, and then it will fold out into a bed.
Oh, so that you can use it can be a multi-purpose room instead of just a guest room that you have right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about drinks? What are you drinking?
I am actually drinking. So you may critique me for just drinking a cheap beer because I always am drinking something kind of boring. But I actually picked this out on purpose because this is a Negro Modelo, right?
It's a good beer.
This is my favorite cheap Mexican beer. You cannot get craft beer in Mexico unless you're in a big city. So basically, everyone just drinks like Modelo, Pacifico, or Tecate, or those kind of things. And my favorite, and like kind of the top of the line of the mass-produced beers, is Modelo, and I love the Negro one.
Negro Modelo is a great beer. I
It is a
completely
pretty good
support
beer.
that. Yeah.
I thought I was feeling I might go down to Los Cabos this winter. I was just thinking that the other day and go for a driving trip, and I was in a Mexican mood, I guess, and I saw this and it was like, I'll grab those. They don't
Nice.
taste the same though. I think they're made somewhere else. They don't taste the same as the ones in Mexico.
Really? Which one's better?
The one in Mexico. Well, I'm used to the one in Mexico, so I'll say I
Mm.
like that one better. But it has like slightly different branding and stuff. Like it has English on it for obviously.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I do think the one in Mexico is probably made at a different location. Oh, so what are you drinking?
This is what I am drinking.
Oh my god! Do you know how much they paid for that branding? So explain it.
So this is a beer that just has it's a canned beer, which is fancy these days. It's like looped back around to become fancy again. And it's just a white background with black text that says regular beer, period. And then the description is a beer that tastes like beer. And they got it spot on because that's exactly what it is. It's Dunclaw Brewing and it's a 4.9% beer, so 5% beer, and it just straight up tastes like a good beer. I don't know what else to say. It tastes like a standard basic ass lager, but it tastes good.
Lager.
And
You
so
could also just get like a Pacifico and pay half the price.
you totally could, but I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I bought this beer because I wanted to talk about this beer on this podcast.
It is a pretty.
It's funny, man. It's called regular beer, a beer that
No,
tastes like
it's
beer. That's great.
derivative. It's just like they are
I like
so out of ideas.
I like it. I think it was creative enough to get me to spend $13 on a 6-pack, which is way too much for regular beer.
Wait, how much
given
on a
what it
six-pack?
is.
How much on a
$13. Inflation's going
You're
crazy.
shitting me.
Inflation's going crazy in the time of COVID where we're printing money. Yeah, it's terrible.
$13? Oh my god!
I live in DC, bro.
Travesty.
So our topic today is going to be motivation. I think that the best place to start with this is with exercise, and I know we've talked a lot about exercise in this podcast, but you know what? Fuck it. You're listening to this now, so you must find something interesting in it. So before this podcast, I was at the park doing some calisthenics training with a group of these guys, and in the beginning it was just me and one of my good friends, and eventually ended up being a group of like 7 people, I think it is, who I knew at least tangentially, and we were all kind of working out together and doing these calisthenics trainings. And I'm much newer to the whole calisthenics community than some of these other people, and some of these people were just fucking amazing, right? Just so good at, strict muscle ups, handstand push-ups on a bar, like up in the air, right? So you're on a bar, like doing a handstand, doing push-ups and shit. Doing front lever, which is where you're hanging from the bar and you're completely perpendicular, or back lever, and all these other really cool moves, one arm pull-ups, all this shit. And I was watching this and I was hanging out with them, and there were these 2 different thoughts that came up. One is that the camaraderie is amazing, right? It's just like really nice to have that group of people that you can kind of know are aspiring to some of the same goals. But then the second part is that it was such an amazing opportunity to feel inspired, right? To feel inspired by watching some of these people who are significantly better than me, and seeing that the culmination of a lot of their effort has resulted in them really mastering these skills, right? And that can hopefully apply beyond specifically calisthenics at a park, right? But what dawned on me out of this was, in order to get really good, you kind of have to be obsessed. You kind of have to be really motivated by your goal and really pushing for something, have an explicit goal in mind, right? And to make this really tangible, I have explicit goals in calisthenics. I want to get a clean front lever. I want to get really clean muscle ups, which I'm actually very close to, but that's not to brag. I want to get handstand push-ups. There are these moves that I really aspire to, but in order to, there's something that sets people apart when it comes to someone who actually achieves those goals and someone who doesn't when it comes to calisthenics, right? And the people who actually get there are going in and day out, and they're motivated by this mission, this ultimate goal that they have, this visualization of their own success and getting this certain move. And no matter how shitty it is that day, no matter how hungover they are or how depressed they feel, they go out and they do it, and they have this vision and they push for it. And that's a different kind of person from the person who treats it as like, oh, this is a hobby, I'll do it once a week, whatever. Right. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I don't know. This is literally like what I was thinking as I left this group of people to come to this podcast. So, I don't know.
I think the idea, the concept of obsession is interesting. I'm not sure if I use that word necessarily. I think there's, people talk about their interests and passions, but you have various levels of that. And it's very hard to have motivation around something that you are not intrinsically passionate about. And I think it's very difficult to teach yourself passion or to become passionate about something that you just inherently not passionate about. And because of that, it's very hard to become motivated to do something that you're not inherently passionate about. And I think that's kind of the intrinsic core of motivation, that you can try to be motivated, but if you are not passionate deeply about it or obsessed, whatever level that is or word that is, it's very hard to become successful at it. And I think in my own personal situation for working out, I'm not at the same level that you are, Steve, in terms of that obsession. It's more of like that. It's not a hobby either. It's more of that middle, like it makes me feel really good. I look really good, and that's more of my goal, but I don't do it because of like some internal personal challenge that's deep for some, it's that I don't have that.
So tell me more about why you do go. So you go because you want to look good, sure, but you already look good, and that's a maintenance thing. So beyond that, like on a day that you look at yourself and you're like, I look fucking good, but I'm going to go to a gym anyway. What is the thing that says I'm going to go to a gym anyway?
Because I could look better. And because...
Okay.
It is actually getting to the point. Maybe obsession is good. I'm not sure if I use that word. But like, so I have a thin body type. Very similar to my father. Like, he just does not get muscle easily. My brother, I'm probably stronger than my brother is. I think I probably am. He looks more muscular than I do, but I bet you I'm stronger than he is. But I do feel that, like, I'm to the point now where I will go to the gym and think, okay, I have a narrow body type. Like, I want to focus on like that specific muscle group there, and like I know what it is that I need to get. Like, my posterior deltoid is like underdeveloped. So like I'm going to focus on that. I also have bad shoulders, so it's also a reason. There's also a health reason behind it. Like, I have bad shoulders and bad posture, and but focusing on those muscles, you improve your posture. It strengthens the stability of your shoulder. So I do go in like knowing all that. I think I sometimes, and I think you do this as well, Steve. But sometimes you're like, well, why wouldn't you think about that? Like, you have to give yourself credit. That so many people, like, that's not even on their radar. Like, that you would go and like know for what reason or reasons you want to work a particular move or muscle group. Like, that's pretty advanced.
So you're talking about the education behind kind of physical exercise.
Exactly, the education behind it. And so those are my motivations, and to look good and to be healthy, and to, it also mentally makes me feel good.
But let me add another one to that equation, because I've heard you talk about when you do your squats, and yes, that's the top level motivation for you. But when you get underneath that bar, I know you, Scott, and there's a part of you that's like, I'm gonna fucking beat my last score. I'm gonna get 5 pounds more. I'm gonna do another rep, whatever it is. I'm gonna do better. Like, that is part of what drives you as well, right? And that's less of the higher brain and more of the lower brain competitive nature of it.
That's true.
It's not that one of them is more valid than the other one, but you kind of need both, I think.
And I want to get to that in a second, but I want to say one thing that I don't like about weightlifting, and I have gotten into it more, and I'm still fairly skinny compared to people I go to the gym with, but um, it is not healthy to lift the weight that some of these people do. And so I'm always like, it's like you are going to have such joint issues when you're 50. Like, so it's also, and like calisthenics, I don't think it's not the same thing. Like, I am putting so much pressure
Yeah.
relative to calisthenics on parts of my body. I'm young, I can completely handle it. I'm nowhere near the level of professional, and I have no desire, to get there because that
Hmm.
isn't healthy. And I think that's the difference between calisthenics and weightlifting. It's like I do have to be careful. Like, you know, I
Yeah.
can push myself really hard, but I have to also know like I am doing this for health as a motivator as well. I need to be careful and know where those boundaries are.
Yeah, you don't aspire to become a power lifter
No,
or anything like
I
that.
mean that's just I don't want to. No, absolutely not, absolutely not. And I think it's different with you in calisthenics to an extent where you aren't going to like kill yourself by.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? When I look at a power lifter, I look at that person and I think that it is incredible what they do. It
Yes,
really
it
is.
really is.
Not just the power, which takes years and years to train to be able to have that, but even the technical capacity. It's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, when I look at that, I don't see myself. I don't
No.
see that as an end goal for me, and that ultimately was what turned me off from general lifting and turned me on to calisthenics, because when I look at what someone who is really at the peak of calisthenics can achieve, that is someone who I would want to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that I realistically believe that I will ever achieve that, but when I look at someone doing some of these calisthenics movements, it's something that I do aspire to, and I really want to get to that level.
Yeah.
And so one day I do think with enough persistence I can convince you to
Yeah,
get into
probably.
calisthenics.
And I think there's also a different mindset around the two as well. And that's what's so if you look at the women who go to the gym I go to, which is for professional powerlifters, um, they are in amazing shape, absolutely just phenomenal shape. The men who go there like professionally all have a bit of a belly, and I think it's like this
Mm.
idea. It's you're focusing on different things. You're not focusing on like a full body health or like full body. Like you said, you look at people who do calisthenics and like that's more of my image of what I want to move towards.
Yeah,
They're
not
more
even
like
just in terms of the physical specimen, which I do agree with that because of, you know, people look fucking sick when they're they're ripped and they're calisthenics people.
yeah,
But also just like I look at someone doing one of these moves and it's like, oh my god, I wish I could do that. When
yeah,
I see someone who can do a full handstand push up on like high up bars and feel confident about doing that, I'm like, oh my god, I wish I could do that. You know?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I
But
wouldn't
yes,
lift like
continue
overnights,
what you were
but
saying.
no, I just think I have a feeling, and this is an assumption that weightlifting is more about mass and size in some way and strength. And like if
Hmm.
you have to eat a shit ton and
Yeah.
like in excess of what you actually need to get
Hmm.
there and get a little tubby, that's totally fine because it's not going to keep you from doing what you need to do. But if you had a belly and tried to do calisthenics, I imagine it
It wouldn't
not,
go over well. It
not
wouldn't
work
at
very
all.
well. But you're going to be fat and do squats. Like it's not hard, right?
True,
So I
true,
think
true.
there's a different mentality around it. So I and the thing is that's why you pick the between the women and the men. Women have all this pressure to look like to not be fat or have any body fat at all. And so they're at the gym, and I think they're always on the
But
cardio.
especially powerlifting women, right?
Especially,
There
they're
isn't that idea for powerlifting men, but there
no,
definitely is more of a stigma
absolutely.
for a powerlifter who's a woman to be fat.
And they're on the cardio like 10 times more frequently than the men are,
They're
and they're
probably way
always
healthier than the
they're
men.
probably way healthier than the men are. Not probably, I'm sure they are. Um, and that's what I totally don't appreciate. But sometimes you'll see guys there who you can tell are taking a more holistic approach
Hmm.
and are doing like maybe like to do a pull up It's like, pull-ups are not rarely done. All right. It's like that's more what I'm going for, and I do pull-ups.
Scott, I think you would love calisthenics. I will pull you over to this side
No, it
one
frustrates me,
day.
Steve, that you're so much better than I am because you're better than I am.
So I was just talking to someone at the park who's actually a personal trainer. He does this professionally. He's been training for 3 years. Had to take a couple years off for an injury, but he's like really really good, right? He's way better at all of the techniques than I am, and he's kind of the guy who helps everybody else out in this group. And he was talking about, as a personal trainer, he runs into a lot of people who look at him doing these calisthenics moves, look at him doing a front lever or doing some handstand push-ups, doing some muscle ups, all these cool moves, and is really interested in, like, okay, how do you do that? How do you get into this? But then as he tries to help them get the foundations, they quickly lose interest and they go off. And the reality is that for this guy to get to where he was at, he spent those 3 years grinding from the point where he sucked at it to incrementally getting better in a slow and painful and honestly demoralizing process. And the only reason he was able to really get to the point that he was at now is he had the willpower to push through feeling like a fucking loser, struggling through these moves, right? And that's what I did too, right? And I'm obviously not at that level yet, and I'm still working on it. But I think that that's part of it too. A lot of people fail, not just in calisthenics, not just in powerlifting, but in a lot of aspects of life, because they look at what they want, and then the reality hits them in the face of what it takes to get there, and they give up.
I want to move on to something else because I think that relates to me. So I'm sorry if I'm too much about myself, but it relates to exactly to this. But the other aspect I want to say is, I talked about, like, you have to be intrinsically motivated for something, be passionate about it. Like, I look at a handstand on a bar, and I have no inkling of a desire to be able to do that. Like, I don't.
And that's
care.
fine. And that's okay, right? I happen to be the kind of person who sees that same thing and gets jealous, because in my body, I get jealous that I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. Yeah. Right? And that's just a difference of preferences, right? Yeah. And that might mean that I will invest more time, more of the limited time that I have, working toward handstand push-ups than you will, but you will invest an equivalent amount of time in something else. Right? And that's fine too, right? Because that level of motivation is part of what you need if you're going to pick up a skill, whether it's a physical skill or anything else, that's going to require you to grind. And there's a reality that you have to hit of, like, hey, I actually suck at this thing, and I need to start with, like, simple steps that seem trivial and seem embarrassing, but I have to start somewhere, and that's the only way I can get there. Like, hitting that realism and moving forward with it, and understanding that every day that you actually put in some time is progress, and every day that you don't is holding you back. That's important. But toward that motivation factor, what I find is really interesting is that there are certain cases in which the motivation actually comes secondary to the investment. So what I mean by this is, and I think that at a high level, and I apologize if this is really vague, at a high level, we tell people, you should find what you love and do that in your career or in your health or whatever, right? And I don't really subscribe to that philosophy, because in a lot of ways, you have to step back and ask yourself, okay, why do you enjoy this thing? And oftentimes people enjoy a certain activity that they perform in because they're actually reasonably good at it, and they see actual progression and progress in it, right? And so someone who plays soccer feels a sense of satisfaction and joy when, after they spend a bunch of time practicing, they are better and they're able to pass someone on the field or make an awesome goal or something, right? And why were they are they truly enjoying the sport? It's because they put in the work and got better and they saw the results out of it, right? And so in a certain way, there are cases in which you kind of have to just invest up front in something, like try to get into something. And then once you start seeing results, reflect on how that makes you feel. And then if that feeling is something that truly kind of resonates with you and you feel like, yes, this was worth it, and I'm truly kind of satisfied and motivated by what my results have given me in this tangible way, then you see that that's something that's worth pursuing forward even further, right? And so this is all really vague, and so let me give an explicit, deliberate example, right? So I started climbing about a year ago. It was end of September last year I started climbing. And I started climbing because my brother and my friend from high school at a high school reunion took me to a climbing gym, and they were having a ton of fun climbing, and I was struggling to keep up with them, and I felt really left out. And just from an analytical perspective, it felt like a good sport to get into because it focused on balance, it focused on a lot of different muscle groups. There were clear kind of grades of improvement, and so it made a lot of sense. And so I wasn't super motivated by the idea of climbing. It wasn't like I was dreaming about climbing after the first day I went climbing. It was like, oh my god, this is amazing, I need to get like all into this thing. It was more of the idea of, hey, people close to me really found this exciting, and there are tangible quantitative benefits to doing this thing. And so I decided I'm going to try this thing. But then when I decided to try this thing, I didn't say I'm going to go every 2 weeks and kind of like see what happens. I went full in on it. I started going 2 times a week, and then that eventually up to 3 times a week. And then eventually I slowly understood how the techniques worked, how the different subtle movements and the changes in my balance changed my capacity to actually get better at it and complete some climbs. And then I started getting some notable climbs, and I started talking to people and conversing with them and debating with them how to do climbs. And I would sometimes get a climb and then be able to help someone else out, and that felt really good. And then I was looking forward and thinking, okay, how do I finish this climb and that climb? And then suddenly I found myself in a place where I've had so much improvement because I put myself into it that I was enjoying it. And then I started going 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And now I'm in a place where I'm fully into this sport. I'm on board with it. But that only happened because I started by saying, I'm going to try to put a lot of effort into this. I'm going to go all in on this and see what happens. And there have been cases in my life where I've gone all in on something and it hasn't panned out and I haven't enjoyed it. But I kind of feel like that needs to happen first. You're not going to always find something that out of the blue is the most exciting experience to have and that you can just kind of immediately jump into and feels incredible and life fulfilling. I think in a lot of ways, you just have to start by investing and grinding and working toward a goal. And the motivation and the desire and the affirmation comes secondary. Does that make sense?
I don't have a corollary to that necessarily. I mean, I don't have a corollary. In my adult life, I'm very sensitive about time, and if it seems like it'll take I really, really, really see time as a resource. I think you do too, Steve. And I'm very, very cautious about expending it in a way that does not have a direct ROI or an immediately visible ROI. And I think that's very helpful for me in some cases. It makes me an extremely pragmatic person, but it also makes me a very cautious person, which I think which I know limits my exposure to other things that I may like, because I always hedge my bets. I'm like, but if it doesn't, I would have spent all that time and that money to do the calculation. So it's for me, it's really about building on some of my childhood experiences around um, traveling and backpacking and being out in nature. And I remember I did not, especially backpacking, I did not used to like it. And I remember house chores. I not very different than used to, but I remember not used to like it. You know, we're going away from working out here, but over time, as I kind of became more of a real person, I thought back to those experiences. And I'm like, oh, maybe there was actually something in there that my parents were trying to teach me about this aspect or that aspect. And you know, with backpacking, I tried it by myself, and I absolutely loved it. And I think I loved it partly because it felt very similar. I felt a strong connection to my father when I was doing it, even though he's not there, because he was so similar in his. When he was young, he would go off by himself, even more extreme stuff than I did. He would climb mountains by himself, peaks. And that was a huge motivator for me. And it's something I've just become to absolutely love, and I feel so comfortable doing it. And just being out in nature, not backpacking necessarily, just being out in nature and knowing about nature and understanding it is a huge passion of mine. And I had to grow to love that. And I think partly being in Minnesota where I don't have it, and I'm sorry all the Minnesotans who think like a flat park is a hike. It's not. And it's not wilderness. And Lutsen isn't skiing. That I lost all that when I moved here, and now that I don't have it, I'm like, I miss it so much. It's such a huge part of me. But unlike climbing, which you know, you can be motivated by and then instantly act on it, I have these passions that like I can't even do here. Like I have to go somewhere else to do it, and I'm always thinking, oh, what, you know, maybe it is climbing, maybe. And I have this in the back of my mind.
Oh, you
like,
should climb.
Maybe I should turn to Steve because maybe he's onto something. Because you know, I climbing and sailing I really enjoyed, but I can't sail around Lake Calhoun another time. It's boring as fuck. Like I want to go out in the ocean and sail, but I live in Minnesota, so it's like, you know, what other things can really drive me? We haven't talked about work, but like, you know, outside, I see myself as much bigger than just work. Like, what else is there? And there's not, you know, I've moved to the house as my main driver and main passion, and I really enjoy that. And that's something that's like, it is a grind, and it is. One of your earlier comments was about how you stop because you think, how much more do I have to do? I mean, it is insurmountable. Like it's a great.
That's the wrong approach.
It's the wrong approach.
Because really, what you should be looking at is what is the thing I should be doing next, right? What is the tangible goal? What is the thing in front of me? Let me get that, and then once you get that thing, then you look on to the next thing, right? And you achieve that. You set out small chunks of achievable goals, and you strive for the one that's right in front of your face.
Right.
Right. That's the only way, right, to not get trapped in the sea of indecision that happens if you look up at the wider, broader road that's in front of you. It's not a practical way of thinking about things.
One of my mom's sayings is, "How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time." It's one of her cute sayings. She has.
That's a great one. That's great.
Many.
You start with the tusks because they cost more money.
They do.
They give you more money.
Especially when you eat them. But you have to...
But here's another thing I do want to say is that, at least for me, right, when it comes to something like climbing or even with calisthenics, where I was out at the park earlier today, one thing that really helps is to have a community of people. I think that's a really big motivating factor for me, right? So when I go climbing, I have several friends who, one or all of whom are usually there when I go, right? It's not that I go because they're there. And again, I think this is a really important point. I go because I'm personally intrinsically motivated to go climbing. And I have my own schedule, and it happens to be that I have friends who occasionally come at similar times, or we occasionally coordinate times. But we are all similarly equally motivated to get better as climbers, and we all happen to go and support each other as we go, right? And it wouldn't be the same if I was super motivated and my friends were fucking off, right? It wouldn't work, or vice versa, right? And so it's a group of similarly motivated people aligning themselves toward a shared goal, and part of it is a feedback, is a positive feedback loop where, because I'm surrounded by people who are also doing the same kind of thing, I am more invested in it and I'm more inspired by it, and so I'm more willing to put in more energy for it. And I think that's kind of important. The community aspect really drives it. And so finding a community of people within whatever you're motivated in, whatever hobby it is, or even just making sure if this translates to work. Again, we've been trying to deliberately keep this away from work, right? So we can expand this out to other parts of people's lives. I think people are too focused on work these days, especially with COVID. But the work example being having really good coworkers who are aligned on a mission to better themselves in their own technical capacity in their career, as well as the capacity of the company to succeed, right?
The thing with all of this is it really shows how, this realization came from while you were talking and while I was rambling on, is that motivation is really based on circumstance. That you have that community where you live and in your specific environment that allows you to become motivated to accomplish specific things. And I have the house, which allows me to become motivated about specific things, or I have ready access to an airport and money, which allows me to become motivated about backpacking and going somewhere else. But what's interesting is also what is lacking that may be inhibiting certain motivations. And I think for me, specifically, the lack of community, which is funny to say, being that I've lived here for like 7, 8 years, 10, I don't know, a long time now.
You've lived there for a decade now, yeah?
Almost a decade. Well, actually a decade, 11 years, actually. 11 years in September. Where it is an area, unlike DC, where a lot of people live here, a lot of people love it, but they are not single people. And Steve has you have that benefit, and it's like, oh, what am I missing out by not having that aspect? And what are you missing out by not having X, Y, or Z? I don't know what those would be. And it's like, then what? And this goes back to me needing to be less cautious. It's like, what are you missing out by not having a certain circumstance in your life or a certain element in your life that could tap some hidden motivation that you don't even know is there?
And that's really deep and important, because it's not just about the surface level of, oh, you should add this thing to your life, but really a more holistic perspective of, by adding a piece that's missing in your life, are you able to fundamentally change the motivational factors in your life, and is that going to make you a better person?
Well, I think the answer to the first one is absolutely yes. I mean, I think you can.
Yeah, and the obvious one is like a relationship, right? A relationship can be terrible, but it could also be incredibly motivating and inspirational. If you find someone who motivates you to become the best version of yourself, and I get how cliche that sounds, but at the end of the day, if you can find someone who forces you to become the kind of person that you want to be, then isn't that actually ultimately productive at the end of the day? And so there's that level of motivation as well. But I need to pee.
Okay. I have to get another drink.
So we've spent a lot of time talking kind of at a high level around motivation and how it affects our lives. What I want to do is hone in on some specifics around lack of motivation. So I think a lot of people struggle with motivation, whether it comes to their career or their exercise. And so, Scott, for people who are feeling kind of down in that shitty place where they're like, I don't feel like doing anything, I don't want to get out of bed, I don't want to like go and exercise, what kind of advice do you have?
That's actually a really good question.
You sound surprised.
I am. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. And I'm not going to answer it directly, because I never answer questions directly. But I think there's a realization I had the other day, and it was talking with my hairdresser. This sounds very silly, very mundane. And she's like, "What did you do this weekend?" And I said, "Nothing." Oh, of course. And I was like, "What did you do?" She's like, "Oh, I was bored. I sat around and watched TV." I'm like, "Wait, I actually did do something by that standard." Like,
Yeah.
I am slowly realizing that a large percentage of the population literally does nothing. Like,
Yeah.
they don't do anything. And when I'm
Yes.
feeling unmotivated, it's because I'm sidetracking myself with with another aspect. The most unproductive thing I do is play a video game that is actually a very high level, complex video game that requires strategic thinking skills. That is the lowest level thing I do. I do not watch TV.
You don't watch TV at all.
I
Okay.
don't. I don't even have a TV.
Netflix, movies,
No.
nothing.
If I feel like I should be doing, like, if I feel like I should be doing work, I'll be reading a book. Or if I feel like I should be reading a book and I'm like, I don't really want to do that, I'll go find something else productive to do. I'm like, I don't want to do that, so I'll
Yeah.
clean the kitchen. It's like, I maybe it's because I've done a very good job actually of removing. And then it comes back to your question of removing the the elements that might sidetrack you. I will watch like 20-minute episodes of Rick and Morty every so often, or The Simpsons. But that's like 20. I'll watch when I get bored and go do something else. I don't binge a show for X or else because I do not subscribe to Netflix. Because if I subscribe to Netflix or if I subscribe to Disney Plus or whatever, I would then have that option. I have a very addictive personality. So it's like I eliminate those things that are not productive for me to be doing. Not because I feel like they're not productive, just because after I waste 4 hours doing something, it's like, what the fuck did I just
Because
do?
you know what the knock-on effects of that would be if you were to indulge this addictive personality by going in and watching this movie. You know what the negative effects are going to be. You know you're going to feel like shit 4 hours later when you're like, I just wasted that time.
Yeah.
Right?
So I guess my suggestion would be, don't get a TV. I told my brother and his girlfriend they're thinking about getting or having a TV. I'm like, what? Don't get a, why do you need a TV? Really? And I know you have it because you play games on it and you're social with it, Steve. But like a lot of people just sit there and just like binge watch stuff for hours and hours and hours and hours on end.
Yeah. Okay, so this is interesting because what it sounds like to me you're saying is if you know what the triggers are for negative personality traits, you should proactively squash that out by limiting your ability to actually indulge in those behaviors, right? Does that sound fair? So if you're the kind of person who smokes a lot of weed, don't have weed in the house. If you're the kind of person who binges on Netflix, don't have a subscription to Netflix, right? Do the things just off the bat that prevent that behavior, and that will help you instill better behavior and alternative uses of that time that's better for
And
you.
as someone who has cut out some of those aspects, you think you're going to miss them, but after a while, you don't miss. You forget about them.
Yeah.
You really do forget about them.
And that's the thing, because when you're deep in that, because I've been deep in all of those phases, right? With all the addictive things besides heroin. And when you're in that state, you can't imagine a version of yourself that isn't as invested in that state as you are at that point, right? And so it's almost like you're killing a version of you, and when you're deep indulging in that behavior, that version of you doesn't want to die. So it'll make all the excuses to prevent you from doing the thing to kill that version of you, right?
Yeah. What about you, Steve? Do you have a strategy?
I think that to an extent, I try my best to implement a similar strategy as you. I don't think I'm as effective because I do have a Netflix subscription. I do occasionally find myself after a several hour phase being like, what the fuck did I do? And feeling really guilty about it. You know, like I fall into these these issues, a couple things I'll say. The first thing I'll say is that at every moment where you have that self-realization of, I feel super guilty because I fell into something that I don't believe is productive, you have a decision point, right? Where you can say, I did this thing. I accept that this happened. I'm going to wake up from this shitty state. I'm going to accept this, pick myself back up. I'm not a failure for it. I just made a detour, and I can move on with my life. I can become productive again. Or you could decide to say, redeeming myself is too hard, so I'm going to continue down this terrible rabbit hole that's going to drag me down. And that's a crossroads that a lot of people face. When someone's on their 5th episode of Westworld, and they're like, I might as well watch the 6th episode because fuck it, this day is trash and I'm a trash human being and fuck it, I'm terrible and awful
and I'm
just a plebe and I'm going to grab some ice cream from the fridge and I'm going to just binge and watch this Westworld. Or you can say, yeah, I feel like shit right now. But that's okay. I fell off the wagon for a little bit and that's fine. People do that. That happens. The real question is, am I the kind of person who is going to double down on that and be shitty and be a fucking plebe, or am I going to pick myself up and am I going to be better? Am I going to do something productive? Am I going to take on a certain strategy that'll help clear my head so I can be more productive for the rest of the day? And I think that that's an important question to ask yourself. And there are really easy things you can do to get yourself out of a funk, right? You could simply get up, go for a walk and clear your head. Going outdoors is super beneficial. It really helps you kind of reset yourself. And if you can take a 20-minute walk, it can help you when you come back. You can reassess, what do I want to do next? And most of the time, you'll be surprised to realize that it's not watching the 6th episode of Westworld. So that can be really beneficial. I think that in general, just the idea of not hating yourself for having slipped and being willing to recognize the lost time was a failure, but that you need to move forward is really important. I've experienced this many times. And I find that the most effective way to get out of it is, honestly, to do something physical. So I will say that. So going for a walk is nice. Going for a run is better. Going out to a park, meeting friends, and doing some calisthenics is a great option. Or going climbing. Not that I'm being biased about what activities you should take for this. But the reason I say this is, it's hard in that moment to realize why it would be better, or to realize that it is a preferable option. But for listeners who are in a funk hearing this, go outside and do something. Honestly, being outside, being active helps.
I agree with that. I was also going to say, in addition to that, because I think it's related, is when I don't have moments of being in I do have moments of being in a depressed state. I guess I'll say that I have times when I feel like I should be doing something, but nothing really draws me to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't force myself to do anything, because if I force myself to do X, Y, or Z on this day, in this hour, at this moment, is that really what my body wants me to do right now? Typically what my body wants me to do is something different than what I'm doing. Like, it's saying, don't keep sitting on the couch and watching Hulu, or don't keep sleeping, or don't keep playing the game, or don't keep like randomly searching the web. Like, do something different. And that,
yeah, but I think that you're lucky enough that you're in a state where your body's telling you to not do the status quo. There are some people, myself included, in certain states, right? Like, not all the time, where what my body's telling me is, yes, sink deeper into this couch and do nothing. Yes, don't get up, don't be proactive. just be a lazy fuck.
Hmm.
And that's the state I'm talking about,
Okay.
where there are people who run into that. And in those cases, you cannot agree with that and go along with it because that's not helpful. That's not productive. That's just going to make you feel worse and worse and worse as you get deeper and deeper in this hole. What you have to do is find motivation. Find motivation to get out of that funk. Find a way to get out of it. And what I'm saying is like the best way to do that is something physical. Just do something physical.
Yeah, I guess I have a slightly neurotic personality, so I have trouble doing any one thing for a long time. I get bored or frustrated with it, and that's usually, and I start feeling not very good about it, and so I don't, and so maybe it's not productive, but I don't think, and going back to what I was saying, I guess it does sound like I'm different, but I don't think I'm going to go make myself do something productive, like work. I'm just going to like do like I think I need to allow myself time to think. That's what I feel like. I'm doing it. I want to be sidetracked. I want to do something other than like a productive A to B productive task, but I don't want it to be this addicting thing that I'm doing. So maybe I will go watch the birds. I bring it back to the birds. Maybe I'll go watch the birds for a little bit, or maybe I will like if I sometimes when I'm at home in Washington, my mom has puzzles out all the time. I'll go do a puzzle for a little bit. It's like, or I'll like
So
go
why do you choose to do that?
just to do something different. And that's what I'm saying. It gets you out because what I find is that when I get really, as we're calling it, unproductive, I get into a addictive task, right? It's addictive, right? And sometimes I think the best way to break away from an addictive task is to go find another task that isn't addictive but is also enjoyable, right?
Oh, interesting.
So
Okay.
like I enjoy looking at the birds for 15 minutes. Like I'll go out like look at them and see if I can identify. I'll enjoy going to put a puzzle together for 15 minutes. But it's like getting out of that addictive state. You see what I'm saying? And like
Yeah.
go do something else that's like not productive, but like isn't addicting. So that's, or I'll like go, I don't know, I'll go like make a shopping list for groceries. Like I kind of enjoy doing that. Okay, what I'm going to eat this week, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That just gets me out of that rote of doing the same thing over and over again, watching the same show or on whatever, or just playing the same game on the computer. Like it gets me out of that. And once I found when I transitioned my mind out of that addictive state, then I don't want to go back. Then it's like, okay, I made that list, or I watched the birds, or I wish at the puddles. Now I'm going to go for a walk. Now I'm going to go to the gym, or now I'm going to do this or that. So sometimes it's hard for people to like make that jump from not doing anything to like,
Yeah, because they don't realize that there's a future state in which they won't feel the way that they do at that moment
Right.
where they feel unmotivated.
See, if,
where,
like-
where if you can take a certain action, that action isn't going to directly lead you to that motivation, but it's going to lead you on the path toward a future state where you have the motivation.
Exactly.
And so recognizing, first of all, that that's going to happen, but recognizing, second of all, that you want that to happen.
and I think
Right.
it's almost, it doesn't really matter what you change your activity to. It's almost just the fact that you're able to stop what you're doing and do something else that
Yeah,
like,
do something different.
breaks that addictive element in your mind. It doesn't even matter what the fuck it is, but just like clean the kitchen. I don't know, put the dishes away, just fold the laundry. Like just break out of that for a second.
Yeah.
And I found it's hard, for me at least, it's hard to go back to what you're doing that was so addictive and unproductive. That's like I'm
Yeah,
I'm
because
doing
it
something
feels
else.
like a step down
Right.
at that point.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
guess it relates what you're saying, but I'm saying it could be a walk, but it also just could be anything. Just like get yourself out of that,
Yeah.
and then continue on. Don't go to A to Z, immediately. You can build yourself out of it. It's what I found that works. For
Yeah,
me.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. And then you enjoy it too. And it's like I could break myself of this addictive personality, but it won't. I still can enjoy it because I'm going from an enjoyable thing to another enjoyable thing, and then I'm like going to the gym, and like it helps you ease out of it as well. I find it leaves you in a better mood and less tired. I think Now, this is interesting. This little spin on everything. I think motivation can also keep you. And this is not speaking to you, Steve. I realize this might sound like I'm talking about you, but I'm not. Motivation can also keep you from bigger things. And I was thinking as we were talking about why am I in Minneapolis? So my biggest passions are not here in Minnesota. The reason I feel day to day is the work. And it's not my job. It's not my job. It's that like I am in Minnesota and it's fascinating because it is such I am in a career of public service. And like that Minnesota is an amazing place to be for public service just because it is such a progressive and innovative state. Not even progressive, just like innovative when it comes to public service. And it's like it's a fascinating place to be for that. But it's like I'm here for the government and like how interesting and fascinating, like how many opportunities it provides. But and that motivates me, but it also keeps me here. And I'm like, well, what if I tried? What if I went to another area of the country? What if I went to New Mexico? I'm sure their government needs a shit ton of help compared to Minnesota. Or like just as an example, like what if I move somewhere else? And that's where I'm saying like motivation can like keep you also on a single track. Where
I don't know if that's the motivation so much as it is the narrative that you provide yourself around your own life and your mission.
that's true.
Because I think in a lot of ways, you, Scott, are have built this narrative around what you are doing in your life that's very much intrinsically tied to the specific career that you have around being a public servant who's in this specific state, Minnesota, helping out this specific county, right? And so I don't know if that's necessarily motivation, but I think it's a really interesting topic just because I don't think I've ever heard you talk about potentially leaving.
No. Well, I think I have, before, and I would say no. I'm not tied to that specific organization at all. It goes a lot deeper than that. I mean, both my parents are public servants, and I'm not going to go into this right now. But like, there is a deep reason. Just like you're in tech, I don't see you transition out of. I don't see you moving to HR. Like,
Oh, definitely not.
Like I am in this area because I really love it and I'm interested in it. It just so happens that like just like in tech, um, uh, Silicon Valley is it's like the place you want to be, or Austin or Denver or wherever.
Not me, but that's what a lot of people say.
But I'm just saying, just generally speaking, or
Yeah.
DC for specific types of technology. Like if you're interested in local government, I've just become increasingly interested and passionate in it. There are very few places where you can be and like I see what you're doing, and have that elevated level of progress. Um, and but there's other places as well. I mean, like California is fascinating when it comes to a governance perspective.
Yeah.
Like wacko. I mean, so different than here.
You would lose 10 years of your life if you moved to California with all the stress you'd have to deal with. Don't move to
I don't
California
think I'm
for
going to
your
move
own
to
health.
California.
For your own fucking health, do not do that. That would be too
Forest
hard.
fires,
But
tsunamis,
we should move to
earthquakes.
Texas. We should go to Texas.
See, that's also interesting because then you'd be in an area.
They'll be like wacko country.
From
It'd be
from
fun.
governance perspective, what's fascinating is you have liberal cities with a like quasi conservative government.
No, it's not even conservative. It's fucking libertarian to the like balls to the
Texas,
walls libertarian.
yeah, the Texas state government is not quite. Yeah, it's not Republican.
Yeah, it's just really unique,
Yeah.
and so that would be a really interesting place
It would
to
be
go.
fascinating.
Dude, I'm talking about it. We should move to Texas.
Steve, now that I have this 15-year mortgage, I'm going to have equity built up pretty quickly. I'm not.
Exactly.
I'm never going to sell this place, but
No, you should rent
the
it out.
rental. Well, the nice thing is, with equity, I don't feel as bad paying monthly if I'm paying towards the equity. So that means I can actually comfortably, from a balance sheet perspective, it makes a lot more sense as well. I could charge less for rent, and it'd be easier to get tenants if I needed that to cover all of the other costs. So I would just pay equity towards the house, and they would cover all of the taxes, the insurance, the mortgage interest, repairs, updates, everything like that, would be from the rental income,
Ah,
and I would just
yeah.
pay the equity out of my own pocket, which I'm okay doing because it's like bank. It's a bank, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I
Especially in a place like Minneapolis,
Yeah.
given when you bought, I
Yeah.
mean, it's perfect. It's
Yeah.
perfect as an investment.
No, I've never said I'm not going to move. I've never said that. I said I won't sell the house.
No, and I agree with that. You shouldn't sell the house. You should keep it.
I'm gonna keep the house.
And we should move to Austin. It'll be fucking amazing. I'll buy a place. I'll make sure it's a 2-bedroom. You can come rent for a little bit while you get yourself on your feet, and then you build up enough finances to buy a new house.
Well, the funny thing is, though, I
It'll
mean,
be fun.
with our new way of working,
Yeah.
I could work from. I asked my boss if I could work from Snohomish for a month, and she said, "Yeah, it's fine."
Yeah, there's no reason why not.
So I'll admit, when we started talking about this, doing this idea, I thought motivation around the gym. That's interesting. Motivation around work. We've already talked about work. Let's see if we get to that. I actually think we went a lot deeper into motivation and like what to do when you don't have motivation and what motivation stems from and the different types of motivation and like the positive in some cases, maybe even the negative. We kind of touch on that at the end, maybe of motivation, like what the implications of it are. That I thought we were going to. I did not think we were going to go there, and I actually had some revelations myself through this podcast about the way I thought and the way Steve thought that I thought would made for a very interesting conversation, at least among the two of us. I hope this very deep introspective dive does not bore everyone to death like every deep introspective dive does. But I thought it went really well from a personal bonding standpoint and a personal growth standpoint. So I hope you enjoy.
I think that's a good ending. All right, let's call it on that. So, Scott, see you next week.
See you next week.